Welcome to the 100th episode of the Flipped Learning Network podcast. I'm your host, Troy Cockrum, along with my co-host, Joan Brown. And the Flipped Learning Network podcast is brought to you by the EdReach Network, bringing educators a voice, a big voice. So today, for the 100th episode...
Fireworks!
I suppose I forgot we could have used the party hats in the hangout.
Oh! You should have told me. I wasn't ready.
We are going to do things we've learned over these 100 episodes, and that's podcast has been going for over 2 years now, and I don't want to say I'm surprised that we made it to 100 episodes, but I am a bit surprised. They say most podcasts make it 7 episodes before they give up on them. And
never give up, never surrender.
I didn't have a goal in mind. My goal was just to not quit doing them right away. So, for anybody who may not have listened before and joined us on our 100th episode, we thought we'd tell a little bit about ourselves. Joan, would you like to start and tell us who you are?
All right. Well, I'm Joan Brown, and I've been teaching for a good 13 years, and then I've been a tech specialist since then for, I have to actually use my fingers to count, probably 7 years now, and actually 8 now that I think of it. So I've been in the education world for a while, but biggest highlight was probably becoming a Google certified teacher, and that's where I met you, Troy. It was in Seattle, and it's kind of taken off since then. The whole concept of really building up a PLN and learning and sharing and collaborating, all that has come to fruition because of the Google Teacher Academy.
I was just, because I am starting a new job here. I mean, I've started, but officially I start next week, and my principal asked me to present to my new staff, and he wants them to tell them who I am, and so I was kind of thinking about what to tell them, and just realizing how much my own development as a teacher accelerated from that point of going to the Google Teacher Academy, and just the past, was that 2011, so the past 3 years. What I've accomplished in the past 3 years professionally is light years ahead of what I accomplished the years before I became Google certified teacher.
That's absolutely sort of the if I knew then what I know now. My classroom would have been a lot different.
So I am previously a language arts teacher as of this school year. I taught for 7 years middle school language arts. And I'm moving to a new school, a K-8 school, and we just decided my title yesterday. My principal and I sat down, and he put in my contract that I was a technology coordinator, which didn't quite explain exactly what I did. We talked about instructional coach, and I'm not an IT person, so we wanted to make sure that that was clear, that I'm not there to fix their printer. I'm there to help them do innovative things in their classroom. So my principal and I decided my new title is going to be Director of Innovative Teaching.
Ooh, I like that.
So I am now a Director of Innovative Teaching, which I still have to kind of explain what I do, but it gives a little bit more direction, because it's an entirely new position, and very few schools have a position like this. So, so that's me in a nutshell. Yes, I became a Google certified teacher in 2011 with Joan, and in 2013 I won the Jacobs Educator Award for IU School of Education, Indiana University School of Education. for inquiry uses or inquiry-based uses of technology in the classroom. So, oh, and I've written Flipping Your English Class to Reach All Learners. So go out and buy it, please.
Well, I did not say what I taught because it's very hard to pin down since I was a military dependent and traveled around. I taught everything from preschool all the way to seniors in high school, so it's really hard for me to say, but my certification is social studies, so that's where I land many times.
So, how did this podcast get started?
That's a good question, Troy.
That's a question that people ask me off air a lot, and I may have alluded to parts of it at times on air. I can't remember if I have or not, but I thought it'd be good to talk about that because even though it's called the Flipped Learning Network podcast, really it's about innovative teaching, and I don't seek out necessarily flipping teachers as much as just innovative teachers. The podcast started based off a tweet with Jack DeHaan, and Jack DeHaan is now a Googler in Seattle, but he was my lead learner at the Google Teacher Academy, and he had been certified as a Google teacher. I think he was Mountain View a couple years before that, but Jack is a big proponent of flipped learning and very active on Twitter and a good friend of mine, and so we were tweeting back and forth about something. I don't even remember what, and I said to him something to the effect of, when are you going to start your podcast? And he tweeted back to me, when are you going to start a podcast? And I had this idea of, you know, if you go to conferences a lot, you have all these great conversations. And I was thinking, it would be great to record these conversations so that other people could hear them and benefit from that, from the conversation. And so when he tweeted that, he said something like, when are you going to start your podcast? And I said, well, I kind of kicked around the idea of doing a flipped learning podcast. And within a few minutes, John Bergman tweeted me and said, can we talk, or can I call you, or something to that. I can't remember what it was exactly. But at that point, I was friends with John Bergman through a lot of the flipped learning stuff that we had done. And so he called me and he said, we're starting this Flipped Learning Network. And he explained what it's all about. It's a nonprofit organization. They want to accomplish this, this, and this. And he talked a lot about it. He said, we're launching this, and we want a media component for it. And we want to do a podcast, but John and Aaron, neither one had time to do it. And so he asked if I would take on the job of doing a podcast. And that's how it started. And so I researched how to host a podcast, how to build a podcast, how to create it, and all that. And Aaron Sams was the first guest. I think John was number 3. I think Brian Bennett Ramsey was number 2, I believe. I don't know. I have to go back and look at the order. But I got to about that 7-episode point that I mentioned, and I was struggling because it's a lot of work, and I was doing much more editing than I needed to be doing. And then the EdReach Network approached Aaron and said, would you like to move your podcast to the EdReach Network? And so Aaron said, the EdReach Network has agreed to pick up our podcast if you want to do it, and here's what they would do. They'll host it for you. They'll put up this. They'll do this. They'll do this. They'll do this. And I said, they'll pretty much do everything that I'm tired of having to do. So we moved those 7 episodes over to the EdReach network and started broadcasting. I think it was number 8 or number 9. It was pretty early on. We started broadcasting from the EdReach network. So that's the history of how it got started.
The history of the Flip Learning Podcast, right there. I think I joined somewhere in 20-something.
That's what I was going to ask, if you remember what number you joined at.
26
and
or
so I was doing it solo for 20 some odd episodes and said, I need help. I need somebody else involved. And I knew Joan through the Google Teacher Academy, and we had talked about other things, and I knew her and I both had a background in media as well.
And that is a fact.
So
I was very excited to be able to use some of that training from so long ago.
Actually, I let one of my friends was thinking about starting a podcast, and I let him listen to one of our podcasts, and he said about Joan, he said, she's got the perfect voice for that. And he didn't say, you have the old line, you have a face for radio. He didn't say that, but he said you got the voice for radio.
We'll just let that lie.
So yeah, I asked Joan, and Brett Clark was involved for a while, but he got a little bit too busy. But Joan jumped on board and has been joining me ever since. And really, I felt like the podcast has made a lot of improvements and gotten a lot more guests, or at least it's been much less stressful for me to find guests and get the podcast together and up on air, and it's it goes in spikes. We'll have listeners. Listeners will grow quickly for a little while, and then they'll spike out for a little while, and then all of a sudden something will happen, and you'll get another big growth. So I think over the summer,
they're gonna love this one.
What's that?
They're gonna love this podcast.
People who've listened to it a lot will hopefully enjoy listening to it in its entirety. But people who haven't listened before, we don't normally do this much general conversation before we get into the meat of the top of the podcast.
We thought we would give it a whirl this time. We can introduce ourselves again and get to know some new listeners. And with that, we are going to tell you all of the great things we've learned by interviewing so many different innovative teachers.
It's amazing the number of people that we've interviewed. In 100 episodes, we probably interviewed 90. I mean, we've had a few people come on twice, but and a lot of we have small people who are less known, people who are really well known, people who are extremely well known, and I was surprised they agreed to be on the podcast. People who are friends of ours, people who've become friends of ours.
And some of them just classroom teachers that happened to be flipping a class and had something to say. Right. So that was, we have it all spectrum. We really have, and even a few off the charts episodes, such as the zombie episode. Oh yeah. But it's all worthwhile, and it's all great listening too. Right. And I've always said, even if nobody's listening, I learn a lot from these episodes. And one of the things I'm going to do with my new staff is I'm going to say, go back and look at these episodes. And if you see a topic that interests you, come talk to me about it, because a lot of these people that we talk to, I consider experts in that topic, and that's why I went after them to get them on the podcast. So we've made a Google Doc, so if you see us, if you're watching visually and we're not looking at the camera, it's because we're reading our Google Doc. And you hear us clicking a little bit, too. Yeah, yes, to keep ourselves organized. So the first one on the list is getting feedback from the students and parents, and that's from our Crystal Kirch episode number 28. And I wrote that one because I really was impressed with Crystal. She does surveys, at the end of really every unit, at the end of every quarter, she's surveying her students. Did you like the way we flipped this? Did you, get as much out of it as you needed? What about that video? Was that one well explained? And she does the same with parents. And she knows how to really adapt and change her class because of it. And I would have never thought to devote that much energy to the feedback.
And I'll have to say, one of the ones that I listed later was simply that Crystal Kirch is just plain awesome.
Yes.
Every time I hear her talk, I learn something new. Like you said, she does so much great things with feedback. She does this WSQ form, which is watch, summarize, question. She does so many great things with technology, and as of this school year, she is now out of the classroom. So she was a math teacher, high school math teacher. Right. Now she's going to be a technology coach or an instructional coach. So
happens to a lot of us. All right, Troy. Another lesson we learned is that teacher reflection is a great side effect of flipped, and that was from episode 27, the interview with Lodge McCannon, Dr. Lodge.
Yes, I enjoyed my discussion with Dr. Lodge McCannon. He's different because he does a lot with flipped learning as far as on the research side. At the university level, he's at NC State, but he's not in the traditional kind of flipping circles. He doesn't present. He doesn't go on the presenting circuit. He doesn't do training sessions per se. But he does a lot of blogging, and his one of his former students, Katie Gimbar, does a lot of YouTube videos and things like that. But one thing he talked about that is making your flip videos is a forced reflection on your teaching methods and your delivery and things like that. And I really liked how he said, we've been telling pre-service teachers to videotape themselves for years to help build their teaching skills. And if you're making your videos and not rewatching them and reflecting, you're losing an opportunity to become a better teacher. So that's one thing I really got from him.
I also mentioned that he has students make his one-take videos as well, and he talks about Bloom's taxonomy going all the way to the publishing level. That's higher than any other level, and so that's part of his point about video. And I wrote in here as well that he wants to solve an educational problem with an economic solution by using that one-take video and making time, a factor, on your economic supply and demand. And I think it's smart. What he's got out there. You should take a look at it, and you should listen to number 27 because that one was well worth listening to.
And another one on the list is be enthusiastic because you never know when folks will catch on with what you're doing, and that was Aaron Sam's episode number 1.
Oh yeah. I met Aaron at a flipped learning workshop, and poor Aaron it was at that time when everything was just spinning out of control for him. He was jet lagged. He had a horrible cold. And he was the peppiest person that you're ever going to meet. And it didn't matter how many times someone asked the same question. He answered it with, everything was just great. And I was so impressed with that because I could just imagine what it would be like as a student in his classroom, just being on fire all the time. I know he's a physics teacher, so you got to watch that. But anyway, so again, Aaron Sams, if you go listen to number 1, that one's well worth it. Aaron's just awesome, and you can look up anything he's done on YouTube as well. Those are all great.
John and Aaron are celebrities in the flipped class world, and I met them at my first FlipCon was FlipCon 4 years ago in Woodland Park, and both of them have so much energy and are so passionate about, like you said, they get the same questions over and over, but they're still talking about them passionately. And you know, John and Aaron are both different people. Um, and you know, we joked at FlipCon this year, if you go to a conference with John and Aaron, you can't hang out with both of them. John's up early in the morning running, you know, training for a triathlon. Aaron's up late at night drinking beer. So if you're going to try to hang out with both of them, you're going to be up 24 hours. But they're both great guys, and you're right. It's just they were great spokespersons for the, you know, they kind of fell into this flip learning movement. It's not something they planned, but they were the perfect people to launch it and grow it.
Our next lesson learned is math can be engaging when taught well. And that's Dan. Dan Myers, and that's from number 16.
And I didn't mean that to insult math teachers, but the math teachers I know, besides, you know, Crystal Kirch and Stacey Roshan and some of the great ones, but the ones I know, or several of the ones I know, keep wanting to teach math the same way it's been taught, and students struggle. A lot of students struggle in that system. And so, as Dan Meyer says, he tried to teach a subject to students every day that they hated, and it's difficult to do. And so he came up with so many great ideas on how to make math engaging and create real-world problems. Using, you know, he would take textbook examples, you know, like story problems from a textbook, but then rework them to be a real-world example. And so he did, you know, he showed me. And so whenever I talk to a math teacher who wants to be more engaging, knows that they need to change some things, I always say, go watch some Dan Meyer videos, because he's great. And interestingly enough, he was not I would consider he was an opponent of flip learning when I interviewed him on the podcast.
I recall that, yes.
And he's since turned, I wouldn't say 180 degrees. He's not rah flip classroom now, but having seen how, because he lives by Ramsey Musallam, and they have since met, and seeing how Ramsey does it, talking to John and Aaron, and seeing this flip class movement grow, he's become more, he understands it more and is more supportive of it than he was back when I interviewed him. And so that it's an interesting episode to listen to. And see how math can be taught well, and how somebody who has a lot of the same elements of a flipped class didn't agree with flipped classroom.
Yes, I have to say I wish that they had taught math like that when I was young, because I did not enjoy math, and when I watch one of Dan's lessons, I'm just enthralled.
And so
another math teacher.
Yes, the next one is students pacing themselves reduces their stress, and that's our good friend Stacey Roshan.
And that was our number 17 episode, and I was very fortunate to go and see Stacey in her classroom, and I'll just tell you, there was a relaxed feeling from the moment the students walked in. They all came in, and it's interesting, in her school, she works at the Bullis School up in Maryland, and they can bring their own device, and most of them have a variety of different types of computers or phones or what have you, and they all come in and they all sit down and they begin on their own in their own way, and they collaborate on their own, you know, without being instructed to do so. And Stacey is right there from the moment the bell rings, already face to face with each student, trying to help them, trying to see where they are, working through some of the things that they had questions about. I was just so impressed. And as with every class, there's always going to be a few difficulties, but it was so easy and smooth to move the student right back into what they should be doing. So very impressive kind of teaching environment, and people should get that opportunity to watch someone. But you got to listen to her too, because she did a great interview.
She's got a lot of videos on YouTube as well. Her introduction video I use when I do like a basics of flip learning workshop. I show them her introduction video and say this is what a good to introduce to parents and to students a good video is. But yeah, and I'm jealous. I mean, I know Stacey, but I've never had the opportunity to sit in her classroom, so I'm jealous you got to do that and get a feel for what her classroom is actually like.
We're going to bounce to a completely different topic. Jim Sill. First of all, students are already doing creative things with video, and anybody who's been on YouTube should realize that. And then also that YouTube does have a ton of features that nobody has any idea about.
Right.
Those came from number 35.
And I laughed too when you say we're going to a completely different topic and you said Jim Sill, because Jim Sill, he is a completely different person. He's a lot of fun to be around. He has similar backgrounds to us. He was in television. He was a television producer of some sort. I forget exactly what he did. And then he went into teaching, and now he presents full time. One of the things he pointed out when I interviewed him was, your students are already doing things with video, whether you realize it or not.
Yes.
They're at home doing some cool things with video, so why not embrace that and bring it into the classroom? And then he's the YouTube guru that he knows all the features, all the hidden buttons that YouTube has, and I'm surprised. As a Google product, they have so many hidden buttons. But how to add an introduction to a playlist was one thing I remember learning from him during that episode. And I interviewed him at a Google Summit. I believe it was the Charlottesville Google Summit.
It was here in Virginia. Mm-hmm.
So if definitely check out that episode if you have the opportunity to go to a Google Summit that he is speaking at. Do that as well. But yeah, Jim Sill is YouTube guru. Search him, Google him, find out what he's doing, and listen to that episode, number 35.
All right, our next one
is talk to all your students and no one hides, and that was Heather Whitton, episode number 21.
I almost feel like you'd be better versed to talk this one, because Heather's an English teacher. And
Heather's actually a Spanish teacher.
Yeah. And she was able to spend the time in the classroom where as every student would produce any kind of work, she could go back and talk them through it. The reason I said the English teacher part was because I felt like it really aligned well with a language arts classroom as well, what she was talking about, where there's all this content that students produce in either a world language or an English language classroom, and that feedback and the time with each kid. It can't be done unless you utilize time somewhere outside. And I think that's what you were able to do in your own classroom as well.
Yeah, it definitely helps to be able to make those contacts with students and being able to utilize all the different tools we have available to do that. Heather is still one of the few foreign language teachers, and she's very eager to get more foreign language teachers involved in in flip learning, flipping their class. And every time I talk to her, she's just like, I'm that lone language arts person out there, you know. But she's brought a lot of people over, and you're right, she does a lot of great things in her class. So if you're interested in foreign language or how to make contact with all of your students, that Heather Whitton number 21 episode is a good one.
I want to understand this one, the concept that flipped learning democratizes learning. That was Tom Driscoll, and you had him on 2 times, number 34 and number 19. So what do you mean by democratizes?
He's a history teacher,
Mm-hmm.
high school history teacher, and he's went through a lot of evolutions, which is, you know, I need to bring him on again because what he's doing now is different from what he was doing in episode 13 or 34 and 19.
Mm-hmm.
But democratize it. He says the way he flips his class almost levels the playing field. And some people say it does the opposite because of some kids have technology and some don't and this and that. But he says once you figure out a way to get students access to all the content, you're leveling the playing field as far as kids are learning how they want to learn and how they learn best, and not how, if they're not good at sitting in the classroom listening to a lecture, they're out of luck, right, in some classes.
Mm-hmm.
And so he felt like it, you know, he uses the word democratizes because he's a history teacher, but it makes learning much more accessible to everyone and much more like a democracy, I guess you would say. And it was just interesting to hear him say that. Now he's into game-based learning and gamifying his classroom, and he's using gamification with the mastery model, which is an interesting concept, which I just found out at FlipCon this past FlipCon when I talked to him. So he's another one that, you know, you find out flip learner or flipped teachers are constantly evolving their class. He's one that's evolved quite a bit, and so those are some good episodes to listen to, 19 and 34, and I'm sure within the next couple of months we'll bring Tom on again.
Just for the sake of our listeners too, Tom, he runs a, I guess you call it a blog, the flippedhistory.com blog, and there are lots of folks there that contribute, and there are articles there that just you know, go across the whole field of innovative teaching. So, and I know all my history teachers are very aware of this site because they get a lot of great ideas there. I just thought I'd mention that one. All right. Another episode we had was 22, very similar to one before. Formative feedback every day is so valuable.
That was April Gutenrath, who was the first English teacher that I ever met that flipped her class, and she still does. Actually, I'm going to see her tomorrow because her and I are doing a training down in Huntsville, Alabama. So I'm going to see her tomorrow, which is exciting. I always like to see people face to face, but yeah, tell us more about what you know. She's an high school English teacher. Tell us what you learned about formative feedback from her.
I was just looking at it in terms of writing and getting that writing process going with students in a way that helps them beyond just the 45-minute classroom. And she does flip, but it's really more what she does in the classroom that matters, and how she gets those students moving to a better writing skill. You've been working with her. Didn't you present with her?
At FlipCon last year, not this past summer, but FlipCon prior, we presented together. Yes.
And so her iteration is, where is she going? Because that was number 22, so that was a while back. She focuses more, like you said, on feedback. She's more of how can I flip my communication with students as opposed to necessarily how she can flip her content. So she doesn't do flip videos
She does them some
Mm-hmm.
in content-wise, but she does more with flipping the feedback. Her and Kate Baker are a lot alike, which I presented with Kate Baker this past FlipCon. And so April's more, how can I communicate, how can I use this technology to flip how I communicate with my students? So that's really where she's been going with it lately.
Is she using voice comments?
I don't know.
Okay.
Uh,
I'm just curious.
I'm sure she does some variation
Mm-hmm.
of voice comments. I know she's played with it. I don't know if she's using it currently.
Okay.
Um,
All
so.
right. We had Pat Semple, who is a librarian, and so you have here that flipping allows a library teacher to use limited face-to-face time much more effectively.
Right. I was impressed with her because, a lot of schools limit the amount of time students get to spend in the library.
Mm-hmm.
She was expected to give instruction to students, but only had them for, I forget the amount of time, but she saw them like once a week, and it wasn't a very long time that she got to see them.
Mm-hmm.
So she flipped her content, so she had them do watching videos on research skills and things like that. So then when they came to the library, her time with them was much more efficient, and the whole concept of flipping is how's the best time to use your time with the students. And she's figured out a way with her limited time to use flipping to her time with the students becomes much more efficient and effective. And it was just interesting to see that from the library perspective, and that she takes it, the library very seriously, and which should be that media center should be taken very seriously, and she uses that time well.
Seems like a theme.
And I believe, isn't she is at the Bullis School with Stacey Roshan, I believe.
She is, yes, and that's where I met her, and
Okay.
I actually saw her library, and it was really nice.
So the next one I'm going to throw to you, and then I'm going to run and grab my charger because my battery's running low and I wasn't prepared for that. So,
All right.
Rob, and I always Drajewski, how much a teacher can learn from a student in 90 seconds. Talk about that.
Well, I think Rob is doing some student-made videos, which several of our guests have done, and this was before I was actually on the podcast, so this was one I listened to, and honestly that's what we need to hear, what the kids are saying when they're trying to explain something, and so he was trying to emphasize how important that is. And that goes right hand in hand with several of our other messages that we have here. We're talking about peer instruction with Julie Schell. It's very similar concepts.
Yeah, he was good. Oddly enough, well, I don't know if it's oddly enough, but that's the most retweeted episode. And it was weird. It was posted on somebody's blog. And that was episode 24. And somebody posted on their blog, education podcasts you should listen to, like the 20 education podcasts you should listen to. And they linked that particular episode. And so people who find this blog go to that episode and then retweet that episode, and which is fun. I mean, it's a good episode to listen to, but I'm just like, we've done 76 episodes since then.
Right.
Why are people retweeting episode 24 when there's 76 other episodes that they could be retweeting? So, but it's interesting how things live on the internet and stay on the internet.
Oh yeah.
But Rob's a good guy. Met him down in Florida last January, and so and he, like you said, he does a lot of good things with his students.
All right. Should I do mine? Or no, wait. I'll do one of yours. Using inquiry in a history classroom so students can do what real historians do and not just read from a textbook. And that's one of my favorite interviews. Carl Lindgren Stryker, number 29.
Carl's great. We need to bring him back on now that he's only been on once. Well, I think we've got him episode 29. I feel like he's been on twice. But
I think so.
Carl, what I love about he uses inquiry in his classroom, and his whole concept is he wants students doing what a real historian would do. They wouldn't just read about something; they would go out and explore it. You know, if they can't go to where the place, they would understand why it's historically significant. And he has the students being historians in his classroom and doing a lot of inquiry learning. And Carl is I like talking to Carl because he's very cerebral about his teaching. Um,
It's a good
and
word for it.
he really makes you think.
Mm-hmm.
And so that can go on to the next one because you put a Carl one too. Give students choice about when learning will take place for your class.
He really threw me in the interview because he talked about how, hey, if one of my students says they need to study for a biology test, I say, sure, fine, as long as you get what you need out of my class as well when you want. And I was thrown by that a little bit because I know a lot of teachers that would not fly in their classroom to allow a student to do somebody else's classwork. But that was his point, was that there's a time for learning, and it doesn't always have to be the time you prescribe as the teacher. And so that's part of the whole flip business is that what goes on outside the classroom is effective learning. And that we got to remember that. So it's a great lesson. And he just threw that in there too. I really wasn't thinking that was emphasized. It was just something he said.
Carl's a great one. Listen to the episode. What was that one again? 29.
29.
And
I know there's another one.
We need to bring Carl back on soon.
Yeah.
He also is one of the organizers of Ed Camp Home, which is I think in his third year.
Wow.
And he's last time I talked to him about coming on the podcast, he's like, I'm really busy planning the next Ed Camp Home. He said, once I get finished with that, I'll certainly come on. So I think that was a couple weeks ago. So we'll get him back on.
Yeah. Your lesson learned was fluency and disfluency and their effects on learning. You're going to have to educate me on this one. Dr. Jason Tangen, number 25.
Yeah, so that one, he really took, and I can't even remember what the topic was supposed to be. He was a professor in Australia. And then when I connected with him, he turned out to be Canadian, and I'm like, wait a second, where's your Australian accent? He's like, well, I'm Canadian. And I'm like, oh, okay. Which I didn't get him just because he was in Australia, but he does a lot of research in this concept of fluency and disfluency, and he's shown, and it's kind it's there's a concept, and I'm oversimplifying it. I'm sure I am, but there's a concept that kids need to have everything totally explained to them so they know what they're learning, why they're learning it, and what their outcome is supposed to be, right? There's a movement of teachers that say students have to have everything explained to them because it's unfair to expect them to learn if they don't understand what they're learning or why they're learning and all that. And he said sometimes, and that's fluency in learning, teaching students the process of that learning process is fluency in learning. He says he's found some research that disfluency causes students to learn better when they don't necessarily know what the outcome is supposed to be, when they haven't been told a lot in advance. That's considered disfluency. And we know, it's certain types of inquiry. We know Ramsey does a lot of that. He calls it stressing the cognitive load and things like that. So this concept of fluency and disfluency was really, like I said, I don't even remember what the episode was supposed to be about, but that's what it ended up getting into is, and when you talk to university professors, they always, at least for me, they're always way above my head and fascinate me with their research, and so that's what I got from him.
I think he's right. There was a video I saw online, and I really cannot tell you the name of it, but it did show that preconceived notions about scientific outcomes make it almost impossible for students to learn the actual outcomes that they see, even when shown the experiment in class. And so you probably are right in that regard, that if they have learned it before or they are explained too much, sometimes it doesn't work for them. All right. Oh, it's mine next.
So there's a difference between flipped lessons and flipped classrooms, and that's John Bergman, number 26. So we've had John on twice.
Mm-hmm. And I was listening to that one. I wasn't participating, but basically a flipped lesson really is the first iteration when someone goes out and they attempt to flip something, and they just pick one particular lesson. They go, okay, well, I'm going to, move that homework to in the class, and I'm going to, well, that's completely different than being an actual flipped classroom and having a different setup in your classroom, having the use of technology, being able to use inquiry, and having the time for students to use choice. That is a whole nother ball game. And I know John doesn't do this video. It's actually Aaron, the 3-ring circus video that's out there. That's really kind of funny. It's kind of in fast motion. And that is where he's showing a mastery classroom where everybody's doing their own thing and they're all doing something different, and the teacher's running around, trying to attend to everyone. But in reality, that's the best setup in most situations for those kids because it's differentiating. All right.
John is good as, that's the whole push lately for John has been the second iteration. And that's their whole second book is about the second iteration. So.
And that's out now, isn't it? The second book.
Yeah, it came out in late June, so it's out there now.
Okay.
You can get it.
Get there on Amazon and find it. I'm going to put two of yours together because they kind of do go together. So Julie Schell and Eric Mazur. Julie Schell was the steps to peer instruction. That was number 50. And Eric Mazur was the journey to peer instruction. Right. And that was number 52. So, and they work together, right?
Yes, they do.
Okay.
Kind of. Julie works for Eric Mazur's organization.
That's what I was thinking.
But he's at Harvard and she's at University of Texas at Austin.
Okay.
So physically, they're not as far as that part of their job, they don't work together. But he has an organization, and I forget what it's called off the top of my head, but he has an organization that she is one of his researchers.
That's what I remember. Yes.
But so the
Mazur group. It sounds like it's called.
Yeah, that's true. That's what it is. I should remember that. So his journey was he was an excellent physics lecturer, I believe, physics lecturer, and he got praised about how well he lectured. His students loved his class. It was one of the most popular physics class on campus. But he would look at his test scores and he was like, my students aren't learning. No matter how good of a lecturer I am, they aren't learning. I've got to do something different. And so he came up with this concept of peer instruction. And then when this flipped learning movement came along, he realized, wait a second, peer instruction and flipped learning have a lot of key elements that are the same. And so Julie has really been pushing this flipped learning and peer instruction go very well together, and they do. Troy Faulkner up in Minnesota, he does a lot of peer instruction in math. I did it in English, but then talking to Julie, I did what I thought was peer instruction until I met Julie and realized there's actually steps to what true peer instruction looks like. And so, you can do variations of peer instruction, but if you want to do it well, you should listen to episode number 50 and hear Julie explain how these steps that you go through to do a good peer instruction lesson. Or you can read my book, because I have a whole section on that in my book. And Julie Schell is actually one of the reviewers that's on the back of my book. So that's, I just liked talking to both of them. And when I talked to Eric Mazur, it was fun because he was in I think it was a monastery in Italy, traveling at the time. And so it just had an interesting feel to the episode, to the interview, even though he cut out a couple of times. And so if you're interested in peer instruction, numbers 50 and 52 are good ones. And that's like Eric Mazur's one that I didn't think would take the time to, he's a pretty well sought out person. And when he agreed to be interviewed and also do it while he was vacationing in Italy, I was just like, wow, that's awesome. So.
I think.
So next would be individualized learning plans for teachers, and that's our friend Kristen Daniels, and that was episode number 30.
Really, Kristen is my mentor because I listened to episode 30, and I had recently become a technology coach, so I was listening to how she approached it. And yeah, she started off with the issue of how am I going to reach all these teachers and what am I going to do to make professional development work. And she came up with a system, and it's quite effective, that she has an individualized lesson plan or learning plan for every teacher, and she checks in with each of them and she watches progress. And it's much more personalized than what most of us, we do some kind of a training and we let them leave, and hopefully we never hear from them again, kind of thing. And that's unfortunate because we don't ever find out if they are using any of the skills we're teaching. We don't ever find out if they understood what they learned, which is all common sense for a teacher to do. And she has a huge district. I'm trying to think where she is. Help me out. She's in Minnesota, right?
Yeah. Well, she now works for TIES. She is in Minneapolis. She's outside Minneapolis.
Okay.
She was with the district. We had FlipCon there. Stillwater. She was with Stillwater, and recently she moved to TIES, which I don't know exactly what TIES is. I should research it more.
It's a ISTE affiliate, I believe.
I believe so too. And so she's doing that now. But yeah, she's great with. I've interviewed her.
Hey Troy, I lost your audio. There it is.
I interviewed her at ISTE one time, and it was a very short, 15-minute interview maybe. And then I brought her on the podcast. Again later. So she's a good one as far as, like you said, learning about how to do flipped PD.
And she uses a lot of the Google apps to do it and do it well. All right. You have written about Adam Bellow, and he teaches us that teachers should share their ideas and passions to change education. So
Adam is a very famous, I would say, ed tech person. He's been a keynote at ISTE, and everybody knows him. He does EduTecher website, and he was in our Google Teacher Academy. And it's one of those I wish I would have known then. I didn't realize who Adam Bellow was when he was sitting at the table right next to me at the Teacher Academy. Then I go to ISTE and hear Adam Bellow's name all over the place, and I'm like, that's the same guy that I was sitting next to. So I interviewed him, and he's all about sharing what you do and sharing not only what your students do, but what you do, because he feels like teachers can change education and can change students' lives just by sharing what they're doing and letting things grow. And he talks a lot about how teachers can get kind of brought down by the system, I guess is maybe a polite way to say it. And he says we need to be out there sharing what we're doing and pushing ourselves and pushing our colleagues and pushing our students, and that's how we're going to change education.
And you got to see his keynote if you have a chance. Adam's got a great keynote. It's a lot like an Ignite speech. I mean, he just zips through thousands of slides, and he has lots of personal stories that are moving and funny, and just a really wonderful person to know. He's so friendly too.
Yeah.
So that was number 52. So get a chance to listen to that episode. I guess it would be one of mine now.
So I'm going to bring up somebody that's a lot like Adam.
Okay.
Put down. Build It and They Will Come, all about Creative Commons with Rushton Hurley, number 79.
I had the most fun interviewing Rushton because he is a hoot.
He is.
I mean, all around, he gives you so many sound bites. And then I started thinking, well, do I have any for this? His quotes are phenomenal. But the whole point, I mean, we talked about a lot of things because we were there at a Google Summit and we just were, in the mode. But he was talking a lot about making sure that students are creative and then sharing it out. So he was talking a lot about the Creative Commons licensing and how teachers need to know about it and understand it, because it is very important that teachers are creators as a model and that students are creators. And then, of course, he has his big a website where he's got contests on students creating all kinds of really fun videos about explaining, learning something through a video. And you got to go look him up online as well, just to hear him speak. But on number 79, you'll hear so many funny things that he says. So it's well worth listening to that.
That was because it was a Saturday morning. And or was it a Sunday morning? It was either a Saturday or Sunday, but it was a weekend morning, and you were live with him, and I was joining via Hangout, and I still had fun. Mm-hmm. I mean, I felt like it was a great way to wake up and spend the morning.
Yep.
Being enlivened by Rushton Hurley. So I agree, that was a good podcast.
All right, Molly Schroeder, number 83, constantly be in beta.
Yeah, so I think she put a lot of maybe the way we think of our classroom and our students into words. I mean, she said she's a big Google person. If you don't know Molly, she was keynote at this year's FlipCon. She keynotes a lot of the Google summits, and she has this idea of that teachers should constantly be in beta. That like Google constantly releases their products in beta because they're constantly making them better, and they feel like very few of their products ever get out of beta mode because they're constantly improving them. Mm-hmm. She thinks teachers should be constantly improving and constantly seeing themselves as being in beta. And so I love that concept. We had Molly on number 83 to kind of promote FlipCon. So watch that episode or listen to that episode and learn more about this concept of constantly being in beta and constantly making yourself better. And it kind of goes along with what we talked about, iterating your flipped classroom. So
that does. Fits right in.
So next, let's go with Adam Kemp. You put robots, rockets, and being a craftsman inspires kids not sitting behind a desk. Adam Kemp, number 92.
So I met Adam at a maker fair, and he was one of those that just drew people into his booth. He had so many gadgets moving around. He had his 3D printers going, and he'd give you a bookmark or whatever he had just printed. And he is the author of the Makerspace book, and he is also working at the #1 high school in the country. So, got a lot of things going for him. I will tell you, if you are into a makerspace or you're interested in the movement, you've got to hear the episode because he explains it all. And he even gave you a couple of pointers, didn't he, Troy?
Yeah, I put that down as mine because we're getting a 3D printer, and he gave me some ideas as far as I never thought about it. It made sense, but there's templates out there you can find to help begin your process for using a 3D printer. And one of the ones he suggested that I'll probably use as my first lesson with a 3D printer is making an iPhone case. And he said there's templates out there, just download them, have the kids customize them to their specifications and then print them out. And so that's going to be a fun thing to try. And yeah, he had a lot of good makerspace ideas.
Mm-hmm. You have Kate Baker down, and she was a guest 2 times, right? Number 71 and number 20.
Right.
And you learned that video is a coaching tool.
Yeah, and that's because we've had her on as she's an English teacher, but also a swimming coach.
Mm-hmm.
And so number 20, I had her on as an English teacher, and number 71, I had her on as a coach. And so she talked a lot in that episode about how to use video as a coaching tool. And we know the professional sports do it all, but now it's getting so much easier. She had a lot of great ideas for easy, free, or easy, very inexpensive ways to use video as a coaching tool in amateur sports, where in the past that wasn't available financially to us. So that's number 71's a good episode, and then Kate's a good one. Number 20 to listen to if you're an English teacher.
Absolutely. We also had number 88 as well about the coach's role.
Oh, that's right, yeah.
And that was, who's on that? Yeah, oops, sorry, there it was. I was just trying to find who it was that was on the 88th, but I do know we had another one with a coach.
Right, we had a PE teacher that did football, but you're right, I'm drawing a blank on who it was now.
Okay, all right. That'd be me next, right?
Yeah. You may not be an expert on everything, but what you are passionate about, go with that. That was Tom Riddle and Wes Dodgen's number 86.
That was our Star Wars in the Classroom episode, and I was so into that one because I'm such a Star Wars geek anyway from way back, and those two fellows really made me think about painting the classroom as a whole experience for students, bringing in something that is, media that is current and really touches kids right now, and making that be your premise and making that work for the content that some of us, we've got some dry content to teach. let's just be honest, and we want it to be interesting still and relevant, and that's one way to do it. So we did a Star Wars episode with them. We're considering having both Tom Riddle and Wes Dodgens back as well, so hopefully you'll get to hear them again, but go back and listen to number 86 if you want to hear about how to integrate Star Wars.
That was right in line with our pop culture in the classroom kind of series.
Mm-hmm.
We did zombies in the classroom and then followed it up with Star Wars in the classroom, and now it'll be Indiana Jones in the classroom is what they want to do next. And you're right, I got some great ideas from them and things that we talked about off air with them as Disney in the classroom as well. So maybe even down the road we'll bring them back for that too. But
you know how many references to Let It Go you can use in a classroom? I'm just saying. All right. It's so funny because we both wrote down this episode number 72 with, let's pronounce his name correctly, J.D. Ferries-Rowe?
Yes.
Is that correct? And you have how kids utilize technology without adults to complete homework and how we can leverage that. So you talk a little bit about that one.
Yeah, JD, and he's local to me, so I see JD quite often. And his job he's at a high school. His title is Chief Information Officer, which doesn't have anything to do with what he does. I don't know how he got the title, but he calls himself the head geek. He's kind of an IT person. He teaches a computer science class, but he's also how to use innovative. I mean, he just helps teachers be better teachers. But at the same time, he has a partner who is more in professional development, so he's more on the technical side. But he talked about in his episode. We talked about how valuable is homework and whether we should be assigning it and things like that. And he talked about how his daughter, I think she was 11, the daughter he was talking about, how her and her friends have used technology to collaborate on homework, and things that we thought were good ideas, her teachers probably didn't even know they were doing.
Mm-hmm.
Using a collaborative Google Doc and things like that. So that's a good episode. I've had him on twice, but the debate over homework is number 72, is a really good one.
It is a good episode. I know we, all three of us, talked about processing time and also whether or not that in a world with all this entertainment and demanding schedules for students, is homework still valuable, in relationship to what they're really doing outside the classroom. So there's a lot of discussion back and forth. It's great for teachers who want to hear a debate.
And I'm going to point out one that both you and I put down as well,
yes.
and it's ourselves taking a virtual field trip, number 70.
Oh, yeah. That was just us, but the resources that are in the number 70 show are well worth it. Not just the Google Connected Classrooms and Google Plus, which is phenomenal and really taken off, but several other sites that you might want to listen to the podcast, and you might even want to watch the video on that podcast. There are a lot of screenshots, but definitely worth listening to how you can get the kids really out of the classroom even without doing so, but just using the technology.
Yeah, I mean, I thought, we both came to that episode with some ideas, and as we were researching and sharing each other's ideas, I think we came up with even more ideas. And I came up with a lot of good ideas just from listening to you and seeing the ideas that you had, and I thought that was a good one. Especially, I know a lot of schools are dealing with limited budgets for field trips now, and I'm actually working with a client who has seen their field trip attendance fall, and so I'm helping them set up Google Hangouts to do virtual field trips. Because what they're being told is, we just don't have the money to come to your field trip anymore, and so that's why more people are going to virtual field trips. So.
Absolutely. I'm thinking that it's the wave of the future, really. We just don't have the liability anymore to take kids on the bus somewhere. So that's why. And just to segue in, because we're talking about one of the episodes that does have a lot of resources in it is number 68. And it was really just, I was sharing what was at Google EDU. So you do want to hear this because there's so much there, but also you might want to check it out again because Google EDU keeps changing, and I was amazed at looking at how many live hangouts they have now recorded, and they have a library full of them based on different curricular areas, whether it be science, math, social studies. You can find something specifically for your class there as well.
Yeah, and I was, I know a lot about Google, and when we did that episode, you blew my mind with how much Google EDU had that I didn't know about. Resources that were available that they don't really make. They don't put them out on the front page. You know what I mean? It's
they don't advertise, is what you're saying.
Yeah,
they just don't.
Hidden, and you showed me some things. I was like, wow, that's a very valuable resource. Why don't they make that more well known? I mean, even to us, that we talk to Google and education people all the time, and you would have thought they would have said, hey, go here and check this out. So yeah, that was a good episode for me, and I hope the listeners learned a lot from it as well, because there were just tools there that I didn't know existed, and I know a lot about Google. So.
All right, number 67. I think you have so many lessons to learn from Todd Nessaloni that I'm just going to go through them all here. Consequences for not watching videos and building responsibility in students. You can mention that one first.
Yeah, Todd taught 5th grade. He's becoming a principal this year, but he taught 5th grade, and he talked a lot in that episode about how do you build consequences in and get kids responsible for doing their work, because a lot of in elementary sometimes it's hard to teach them that responsibility, and 5th grade, 4th grade seems to be a pivotal year for teaching them that responsibility. And so, you know, he had a lot of good things to say about giving logical consequences, but building that responsibility in students, not consequences just to punish them for not watching the video, but to actually build those responsible tasks into the students. So that was a good one I learned from Todd Miscellany.
He also said for 5 years he taught with worksheets with no complaints, and now when he teaches with worksheets, parents complain.
Right. So one of the consequences he gave was, well, if you didn't watch the video, you've got to sit over here and do these worksheets while everyone else is doing the activity. And he said some parents would come in and complain and say, why are you making my kids sit over here and do worksheets while every other kid gets to do this great activity? And he said what was odd was 5 years before, or before he flipped, for 5 years, he would give those worksheets to all his students. And nobody complained that he was giving worksheets. But as soon as he flipped his class and was doing better things, people started complaining that their kids had to do worksheets. And so he thought that was an interesting side effect of flipping, is, you know, things that he had done in the past, now are all of a sudden people are complaining about that they didn't complain about before.
Right. He had a very diverse class too, with, you know, some disadvantaged students, and he mentored them by saying, don't let your circumstances define you. And particularly for any students that maybe didn't have the kind of technology at home as someone else, he was really, you know, encouraging them that, you know, we're all going to be able to learn this together. And that's what you wrote down. Don't let your circumstances define you.
Yeah. He said that, you know, he would keep students in at recess who didn't watch a video at home to watch a video, and other teachers would say, well, that kid couldn't watch the video at home, so why are you punishing them? And he said they had opportunities here, and here to watch the video, and they didn't. You know, and so he wanted them to be held to the same standard as other students and say, don't let your circumstances be an excuse for you to not get ahead.
Right.
You put down, and I like this episode too with Nicole Carter, there's not one device that does it all. The Chromebooks versus iPads.
That's right. We had a little wrestling match, Chromebooks or iPads. And Nicole was sort of pro iPad because that's what she had in the classroom. And you were kind of the pro Chromebook guy. And I was a innocent bystander. But in general, you just find out that it depends on the activity that you're trying to do. And, you know, those iPads, they really are slick, and they do some wonderful video. They do some great content as far as different apps go. But then when you want to create, they're a little more difficult. So I found that, yes, it depends on what you're aiming to do. And I think for those of the folks that listen to that very popular podcast, number 75, it was probably because they were trying to make the decision.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is. I still see, you know, I check the analytics at different times to see which podcasts are being listened to, and that's still getting a lot of listens, and still, you know, one of the highest listened to podcasts. And you're right. I think a lot of people want to know, should they choose Chromebooks or should they choose iPads?
You quoted Dr. Jeremy Renner from number 12, our podcast, and you said, if you aren't hurting them, why not keep doing it?
That doesn't sound very good the way I wrote it, I guess, does it?
I'm just trying to understand it. Yeah.
Well, you know, he's one of the early researchers of flipped learning. And it kind of goes along with, because Jerry Overmyer was on that same episode, and they both are doing research for their PhD on flipped learning. And Jeremy Renner, some of his results were the test scores didn't improve. And he was really disappointed that he wasn't able to show a significant improvement in his students' learning based on the test scores. And he said his professor, or his advisor, looked at that and said, but at least you're not hurting them. Their test scores didn't go down. So he said,
Mm-hmm.
if what you're doing is working for you as a teacher, even if it's not improving them, if it's not hurting them, why not continue to do it? So that that was
Get
what
it now.
he. That,
I get it. I get
yeah.
it. And that is true. The research at that time was very minimal. It's
Right.
gotten so much more now.
Right. And then the same episode, Jerry Overmeyer, which he's one of the early people involved with flipping, because when he started his PhD, he was kind of like, well, what's new out there that I'm interested in, and found out about flipping and went and met John and Aaron and realized that's where he wanted to push his research interest and things like that. And one of his because when you do research, you're at the mercy of the teachers in the class that you decide as your sample classrooms and things like that. And one of the teachers that did one of his studies did what we would call bad flipping. He gave the kids the videos and just sat at his desk and said, if you have questions, come ask me. And he said it drove him nuts. Jerry, it drove him nuts because he wanted to get results, and he's like, I know I'm not going to get accurate results from this guy as far as how flipping is, because he's not flipping correctly. But what he found was that particular teacher's test results were very similar to the traditional classroom test results. So that even a bad flip classroom was still the same as a traditional classroom. And so I guess it's encouraging that if you're a bad flipping teacher, it's the same as being a traditional teacher, and hopefully you'll learn that you're a bad flip teacher and get better at it.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you have? Oh, the learning ecosystems have a great impact on whether you can truly integrate technology. And that's Sean Corcoran, number 63.
So we were lucky enough to get that interview because he's a very busy man, being the CEO of Steelcase. But what I got out of it was it's the way you arrange your classroom. You just cannot have desks in rows anymore. Because the students are not going to benefit at all with the kind of technology we have. And that new jargon, that ecosystem, a learning ecosystem, was really a clever way of wording it, because it really is that. It's like a biome almost. Each little individual place in the classroom has a purpose, and I think a lot of people can learn if they go back and listen to number 63 about just thinking about furniture, thinking about classroom arrangement, thinking about even the most mundane things of where are the electrical outlets, really does make a difference. And if you're in any kind of capacity to design a building or even a room from the ground up, you really should listen to that. I was lucky enough in my career to actually design a technology lab, and wow, the number of decisions that you need to make. You've got to have a list. You've got to have a long list.
And related to that, I interviewed some people at Steelcase while I was at ISTE, because their furniture is so modular.
Mm-hmm.
And they had a display set up, as all the major people at ISTE do. And it was like, it was fun seeing all these desks that move around and had all these different configurations and different chairs to sit on, and I was just like, gosh, I wish I had unlimited funds to build this classroom the way I want it with the furniture I want, because they do a lot of research on how furniture should look in a classroom. And yeah, so either one of those episodes with Sean Corcoran or I'm drawing a blank. And I'm sad that I just interviewed her a couple weeks ago. But the ISTE, one of the live from ISTE ones is a good one too as well, about Steelcase.
All right. You have Joan Lee. Number 84 was the episode, and it's just the amount of work that goes into planning an ed camp. I'm going to ed camp tomorrow. It happens to be my district. All of the technology coaches are having an ed camp all day tomorrow, early, by the way. So I happen to know how much work it is because I'm getting a lot of the planning documents and seeing those things thinking, wow. Joan Lee was a blur at the ed camp in Arlington I went to. She was running around and she had been so busy in organizing, but that episode is vital to anybody. Do you think?
Yeah,
they're going to do an ed camp?
You really wanted to bring Joan on, and not that I didn't want her on, but you were the motivator behind that episode, and I learned a ton from her. And I thought, wow, I didn't realize so much went into planning an ed camp, and where to get resources for building your ed camp, and because I've thought about doing an ed camp for my district, and she gave me a lot of good ideas on where I need to start and how I need to plan it and things like that. So.
Yeah, and one of the things that really hit me was getting sponsors. I never really thought about that, and she talked about that in depth, at how important it is to have those sponsors and to have all those giveaways, because that's what's going to motivate people to keep coming and to be a part of the creative juices that are flowing there too. Yep. I'm looking forward to one tomorrow. Which means, I have to get to bed early.
So we've only got a couple left. We've got a few left. I'll talk about one. Dan Giesling, number 48. And that was one of my favorites, only because I'm a big fan of Dan Giesling, and he had nothing to do with flipped learning. He was a teacher in his previous career, but his current career is reality TV star. And he had a lot of good ideas. He did a series on how to get on reality TV, and I was listening to a podcast that he did about it, and I was like, those are all the same keys to making a good flipped classroom video. And so I reached out to him, and he was more than willing to come on, which was awesome. And he talked about how to make a good video, and then I tied it into making a good flip video. And even in my book, I use a lot of what we talked about in that podcast. I have a chapter in my book on making more engaging videos, and a lot of what I got from that episode and what I learned from Dan Giesling went into that chapter. So that was a fun episode for me.
That's great to hear. I think he was a very interesting podcast. I think I was driving when I listened to that one because I didn't get a chance to actually be on the podcast that week. You have another one here that I would like you to highlight before we get to the very end, and that has to do with improv and drama in the classroom. It's Katie McKnight and Adam Marino. And I guess there were two different episodes, number 60 and number 62, that you're talking about here. So you said cross-curricular uses. Right.
So I love doing improv in the classroom. That was my 20% project, which the episode with Kate Petty and Kevin Brookhauser on the 20% project is a good episode to listen to as well. But my personal 20% project was I took improv classes and just fell in love with improv and just started throwing it into my class whenever I could find the chance to do it. And improv has a lot of ties in with drama and how drama is in the classroom as well. And so Katie McKnight wrote a book, The Second City's Guide to Improv in the Classroom. And so that was a fun episode for me. It's just, how can other teachers in other content areas bring in improv? And she gave a lot of good ideas. And we even did improv live on the air, which, that's the point of improv, is not to prepare for it. So that was fun that we did that. And then Adam Moreno, he's a drama teacher in Milwaukee, and he had a lot of ways to not only use drama in drama, but use drama in other classes, social studies and science, and he had a lot of good ideas. So those are two great episodes for using the kinesthetic arts in a lot of different curricular areas.
That's brilliant. I think we need more of that for our classes.
Another one, Mark Johnson and Sam Stecker, episode 59. They had the whole episode was about building relationships.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, I always joke that my first year teaching, like most teachers, I was terrible at classroom management and behavior. And so the first major conference I went to was to learn how to manage behavior. And I laugh about it now because I thought that was the key to making my classroom better, was to manage behavior. And so I convinced my principal to fly me out to a conference in Colorado on managing behavior. And two of the speakers were Mark Johnson and Sam Stecker, and they talked all about building relationships.
Mm-hmm.
And that was years. That was 6 or 7 years ago.
Wow.
And then they started a podcast called Mission Monday, and I listened to Mission Monday and contacted Mark Johnson again about some things I had heard on his podcast, and he did some research on me, and he said, "Can you tell me what this EdReach thing is?" And so I told him what EdReach was, and he said, "How can we be involved?" So then they moved their podcast, Mission Monday, to the EdReach network, and they're both principals out in Nebraska.
Mm-hmm.
And they do a lot of great things with building relationships with students and the keys to doing that. And they even tied it in how your flip videos, you know, if you put your face in your flip videos, one of the key elements of building relationships is making eye contact and showing your teeth, they say. So, you know, you can do that. If you put yourself in your flip videos, you can make eye contact with a student. You can smile and show your teeth. And so,
Yep.
you know, I thought that was a great episode. You know, listen to that episode, listen to their podcast, and you'll learn a lot about building relationships.
That's terrific. Well, I think we probably could give one overall lesson learned.
Yeah.
And it's really the whole point of what we do here and why we do it, and is because the students today really just need more than one answer to the learning dilemma that's in the classroom. So you can say, yeah, I flipped my classroom, or you can say, yes, I used inquiry, or I got project-based learning. But if you only do one, you're not really attending to everyone in the class. And so what we're trying to do here is we're offering as many ideas as possible out there to highlight what's innovative all throughout education. And, you know, sometimes we go way off the path a bit, but it's all relevant because it's real world relevant, and that's what we want, trying to give teachers these ideas. And, you know, we can always hear from you as far as anybody who listens and find out what you think and what you want to hear more.
Right.
That would be helpful, as well as any folks that you might want us to try and interview, and those are all great ideas.
And I haven't been watching the time, but I think we're well over an hour, and our
I believe
our episodes are never this long.
But this one you can listen to in 2 settings. So.
Right, yeah, I agree. But hopefully if somebody listened to the whole thing, they listen to it in intervals and not all at one time. Mm-hmm. I think we should do a hashtag. If you made it all the way through this episode, tweet us with a hashtag. What could the hashtag be? So that we know they made it all the way through.
I don't know if anyone's using Lessons Learned podcast or something like that.
Let's do Lessons learned 100. That'll make it.
There we go, 100. There we go. Lessons learned 100.
So if you are kind enough to sit through this entire podcast,
willing, able,
and enjoyed it, or even if you didn't enjoy it, tweet us and hashtag it Lessons Learned 100, and so we know that you listened to the whole thing. Because we thought it'd be fun to talk about. We made it to 100 episodes, and we thought it'd be fun to talk about all that we've learned, and hopefully all that our listeners have learned over those 100 episodes. And I've talked to a few people who've listened to all of them, who've went back. Either they started at the beginning or they went back and listened to all of them. And it's good to get feedback from those people. But it's also good to get feedback from people who might listen to 2 or 3. And just to see because, even though we're learning a lot, we want to help the listeners out as well.
These are good conversations. All right. Hope it was a great reminder for everyone, too, to listen.
So, episode 101, we're hoping will be part 2 of episode 99. So stay tuned for that. We'll get that up next week. And then we're planning some fun ones for the start of the school year. So stay tuned for those episodes coming up, because we got some good ones, some exciting ones that we think are really going to be good and help teachers be more innovative.
All right, Troy. Thanks.